In the last assignment, you actually had to come in here and create a Google Forms in order to track data, specifically track rodeo expenses. And then that information, you had to link it to a Google Sheets to where as soon as you put information into the Google Forms, it's going to automatically show up in the Google Sheets. In this week, we are actually going to show you a couple of functions that are essential whenever you are linking Google Forms to Google Sheets and wanting to use those responses as far as calculations go. So let's go ahead and get started. First thing I want to show you is that we're going to actually come up here and we're going to say preview. And we're going to actually preview this rodeo expenses, and we're going to start entering data over here, and we're going to see that automatically show up on this side. So the first entry we want to put in is say gas. And let's say we were driving on the 1st of November. And we bought 20 gallons worth of gas at a price of $2.25. It cost us right at $45 total. And this was down in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And if we press submit here, it's going to automatically show up over here. And that we see it has. We have now all of that information plugged in on the Google Forms on this response page. So this particular sheet, this Form Responses 1, is meant to purely just collect the data. Whenever you're dealing with a lot of data and collecting data and using data, you usually want your data to be undisturbed. You want it to be left alone. So we're going to leave this sheet alone. This sheet is purely to collect data, and we're not going to do any calculations or manipulate it in any way. Whenever we're going to do that, we're going to actually add a new sheet. And that's what I'm doing down here. I added a new sheet. We called it Sheet 2. This is where we're going to begin working with the data. Actually, this sheet, this is going to be a stepping stone to where we're going to be working. But I went ahead and added another sheet. And I'm going to call this one, I'm going to rename this the query sheet. There is a very important function that we're going to talk about in this video called the query function. And that function is very essential to making sure that all of the Google Forms data becomes recorded and becomes usable as well. So I'm going to go ahead and give the sheet titles. So I'm going to actually cell reference from A1 on this Form Responses 1. I'm going to cell reference all of these cells onto this page. So how you do that is you say equals, click on this tab on this sheet, and you should actually click on A1. And I was barely able to click on A1. If you have trouble, say, clicking on A1, you can actually click on B1, come right here, and change the name. So now we're back on the query sheet. It automatically jumped back to the query sheet. And you can see that this is cell reference. We referenced across the sheet, and this is now cell reference to cell A1 on the Form Responses 1 page. And if we actually went in here and adjusted this, and we said timestamp 1, for example, pressed enter, it's going to automatically update it and make it look exactly the same over here. Because we have that cell reference, it's going to read exactly the same. So then I'm going to actually just drag this on across, and I want to drag this all the way out to cover up all of my titles. Now, I come right here and I get all the way to Z, and it says equipment serviced. So I'm going to double check over here, and I'm going to figure out if I go actually past Z. And I actually do. I go all the way out to AC. But there is no more columns. So there's one of two, actually there's about 3 different ways to add columns. So we're going to add columns. And one way that I'm going to show you is I'm going to highlight these 3 columns. I'm going to right click, and then I'm going to say insert 3 to the right. This actually gets me all the way out to cell AC. So I'm going to click right here and drag this all the way across to where now I have all of my labels cell referenced all the way across. The next thing I want to do is I want to say equals, and this is that query function that I mentioned earlier. I want to say equals QUERY. And then I want to go ahead and click on Form Responses 1. Go all the way back to the beginning of this sheet. Click on cell A2. Highlight all the way down to the end. And all of my information stops on AC, so I'm only going to AC. And then down. And what we're doing is we're creating one big block. What the query function does is it allows to keep all of the information within these cells in one big block. So now I'm going to go ahead and press or close parenthesis and then press enter. And then you can see the information shows up on this page. And it's, as you can see here, it says equals form responses cell A2 to AC101. And that's going to start all the way up here at the top at this A2, go all the way over to the column AC, and then down to row 101. That is all in that query function block. So now we have all of that information here. Now the way the query function works, and just kind of showing you a couple of deals, is if I type something in right here, automatically going to throw up a reference. So if you ever see a reference, just come in here and delete the information that's in your block. So anything that should be in that block, if there's another piece of information there, it's actually going to throw off a reference. So if you ever see that, go and make sure you have nothing even hidden. Like for example, if I say equals sum of these two cells, nothing shows up. Or it might show up as that, but there's no information really here, but there is a formula keeping that from doing what it needed to do. So the way the query function works is if we go ahead and we enter into a new item in our Google Forms, like let's say for example, we're going to enter in food the day after Thanksgiving, and say we went to and ate at Dairy Queen. We spent a total of $8.50. We were in the city of Casper, state of Wyoming. We press submit. That information is going to show up right here. And as it does. And what happens is we submitted this form off of Google Forms. It first shows up on this sheet. And through the use of the query function, it shows up over here. Now you might be kind of wondering, well, why do we even need the query function? Why can't we use just plain old cell referencing just like you used on these titles? Well, I'll go ahead and show you that. Let's say that we're going to go ahead and use cell referencing all the way down. So I'm going to actually highlight all the way across, and I'm going to drag it down 4 or 5 rows. And as you can see, everything is now cell referenced directly rather than using that query sheet. And everything looks fine for right now. Well, let's go ahead and enter in another response. And let's say that we went and we actually got feed this time. Say you had to go buy feed on the 13th, and you went to Murdoch's. Went ahead and you got grain. You spent a total of, say, $8.99 per bag. You bought a total of 5 bags. It came out to be $44.95. And we press submit. Now look right here. You can see we're on that query sheet. We press submit, but nothing ever showed up right here. We're on that query sheet and nothing ever shows up. But it shows up right here on the form responses page. Now, the reason it is doing that is I want you to pay very close attention. Now that we're on the query sheet, I want you to pay attention to this number right here as we move through these cells. First off, this is referencing A1 like it should, A2 like it should. Then we go to A3, but as we click on this cell that should be referencing A4, it actually references A5. And you can see that this one references B5 when it should be referencing B4. The reason for that is whenever Google Forms inserts new information in, it inserts a new row. This new row will actually distort formulas unless you're using that query sheet or that query function. So if we come back in here and we say equals QUERY, open parenthesis, we're going to use form responses 1 exclamation point, and we're going to do A2 through AC102, and then close parenthesis. That we need to go through, and as you can see, I have that reference up because I have information over here. So we actually need to go through and we need to delete all of this information. And now all that's going to pop up. And from here on out, it will continuously show up just like it did on this second entry. It automatically showed up using that query sheet. Now that we have this query sheet done, we really don't want to use it anymore. We don't want to manipulate it. We don't really want, it's kind of like this form responses page. We kind of want to leave it alone. So what we actually want to do is we want to add a brand new sheet. And I'm going to say, let's call this one totals. Let's rename this one to totals. And I'm going to actually cell reference all of these titles here. And I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm going to get it all the way out to AC, column AC. So I'm going to go ahead and right click here and say insert one right. You can do that again, or you can just click in the middle of a cell and just say insert column. I'm going to drag these all the way across. And I was actually mistaken. I really don't want to call this one totals. I want to call this one actually reference sheet. I'm going to just do ref sheet for short. And here is where I'm actually going to highlight all of these, and I'm going to drag it down. And what I'm doing is I'm just dragging down just like you would and that you've done in the past to where that we're cell referencing everything. And now you can see everything shows up. Now, bear in mind that on this query sheet, I referenced the form responses. On the reference sheet, you need to reference the query sheet. And that's going to be very important that you reference the query sheet because you have to use this query function in order to keep everything blocked together. So that way you don't have lines being skipped, for example. And the reference sheet is being pulled off straight off that query sheet. So what we're doing is we're cell referencing directly to the cells on the reference sheet, whereas on the query sheet we're using that query formula to reference cells off of that form responses page. So once we have all that done, let's go ahead and insert in a new item. Let's go ahead and insert in repairs this time. Let's say we're going to do repairs on the 15th. We serviced the truck. It was serviced by a Chevy dealer. Action taken, we're just going to say it was a simple oil change. And the total cost was about $45.95. Now if you notice, we're on the reference sheet, and it shows up just like it should on the reference sheet, on the query sheet, and on the form responses sheet, just like you would expect it to. So everything's looking good, everything's going right, but that really doesn't do anything for us so far. All we've been doing so far is just creating brand new sheets, and these brand new sheets are just saying the same thing over and over again. But we needed it to do that so that way we have all of our data being collected and unhindered. We needed this one as this query sheet as a stepping stone to where now we can actually start manipulating data. And whenever we're doing that here, now we can actually start using the filter function here, and we're actually going to use the information on this page to start calculating totals. But I'm going to add a brand new sheet, and I'm going to call it totals. And the reason that I'm adding a brand new sheet and calling it totals is because whenever you're looking at this kind of stuff, you want to have it quick and easily accessible. So I'm going to create a list of the total cost. So say total food cost. I'm going to say total gas cost. I'm actually going to drag these down, and then I'm going to just go in there and adjust one word. So feed. This one is going to be entries. This one will be vet. We'll call this one repairs. And then this one down here, we're actually going to adjust this one and just call it grand total. And the reason we're doing this is so that way you can click on just this total sheet and you're going to be able to see how much you spent on food, gas, feed, entries, vet bills, repairs, and the grand total of everything without ever having to actually calculate it using, say, a calculator. It's going to do it automatically for you. So now we're going to use the equal sum function. We're going to come in here and say equals sum. We're going to go to this reference sheet. We're now going to do everything off the reference sheet. And this first one is going to be for the total amount. As we see, this is the total food cost. So we're going to come over here and we're going to find this total spent. And we're actually going to highlight it all the way down to the bottom, to where now we're saying equals sum reference sheet E2 through E120. And if we go all the way up, and this doesn't necessarily have to be 120 on yours, it might only be 100 or 101. Just depends on how far you actually took that, dragging it down. And we see that that's going to be the total spent on the food. So now we can see that the total food cost is $8.50. We're going to do the same thing here, only that's going to be for the total gas cost. Again, we're going to say equals sum. We're going to reference this sheet. We're going to find the total cost of the gas. And what we did is in column J was the gas cost, the total cost. We're going to just sum up all of those information. Then we're going to do the same thing for feed. So you'd say equals sum. And then highlight all of these. Again, we're on the reference sheet. And then you're going to do the same thing for total entries cost, total vet cost, and total repairs cost. So I went ahead and actually put in the sum, the equal sum for those three cells off the video just to kind of save a little time. Then we want to come down here and enter in, say, just the grand total. The grand total is going to be sum of all of these. So now we can figure out exactly how much we have spent on, say, rodeo expenses during that time. Now the really cool thing about this is automatically going to track and going to calculate how much you spent on each one of those categories in real time. So let's say, for example, we want to enter in the fact that we went to, say, Jay's Pub on the 28th of November. So we're going to say Jay's Pub. And we went ahead and spent about, $14.50 in there. Wasn't a too terribly expensive dinner. That was again in Casper, the state of Wyoming. We click submit. So it submits over here. It shows up in form responses. It shows up again in query, the reference sheet, and then we calculate that total, and you can see that beforehand that was equal to $8.50. Now it's equal to, say, 23. Or let's say, for example, we go and we enter into a rodeo on November 4th. The event name was Oh, let's say the event was, say, just Casper Ranch Rodeo. Event cost, let's say it was about $450 to enter. City was in, oh, let's just call it Mills, for example, in the state of Wyoming. We say submit. We're going to see that entries cost automatically show up here. So that kind of basically shows how to go ahead and put formulas using these Google Sheets, and now you have your own sheet that automatically shows you all the totals. Now, there is a specific reason why I made totals its own sheet, and for the sole reason that it is very easy to click on a totals tab and be able to see all of this information. As you're going through this and you're doing this stuff for your own individual ranch or your own individual farm or your own individual operation, no matter what it may be, just remember that whenever you are doing this, you want all the critical information to be easily seen, easily accessible. Here, the critical information is the final cost of everything. And let's say, for example, your boss comes in, or you're the boss, and you're looking at this and you say, holy mackerel, we spent, oh, I don't know, $45 on gas. How did we spend that much, for example? Let's say that at the end of the day, you're wondering, how did we spend that much? Now you can actually go back into the reference sheet, and you can say, for example, you want to be able to see just all of the gas cost. We're actually going to highlight everything. We'll go up here to the filter. So we're going to chunk that filter on there. We're going to scroll all the way up here and then over to where we're talking about gas cost. So that would be right here in the beginning. And we're actually going to sort, or actually we'll come over here to categories and we'll sort everything by gas. Now we can find all of the gas information right there together. Or if you want to, you can actually uncheck everything and get rid of everything with the exception of just gas, to where now you can evaluate that information a lot more closely. Let's go ahead and add all these back in so that way we have all the information there, no problem. But you want the critical information to be easily accessible. Then after that, if you figure out something that you want to look at, you can go back to this reference sheet and begin to evaluate things a little bit more clearly. I hope this video helps with assignment number 15. I wish you the best of luck on it. Please let me know if you have any questions in regards to this.